All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Going for Two Cover Zero podcast. You are here with Jordan tonight and Hassan. Jerry decided to skip out on us and do something in Vegas. I don't know why he would choose to do that over spending a night with us, but I digress. Hassan, what's going on tonight? You ready to rock?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Ready to talk about this defensive slugfest last night that we saw.
Yeah, last night was definitely not a game for you offensive fantasy players. Unless you had Brandon McManus, then you're probably pretty happy with the offensive production last night. But I'll start off with the news and injuries before I dive into that. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. It's at cover00 spelled out GF2. That's cover0 GF2. We're starting to get a lot of interaction. We put up our week 5 rankings, a lot of retweets, a lot of comments on that. So feel free to check that out and drop a comment if you have any questions or you just want to have a conversation about IDP with us. But with that, let's dive into the news and injuries. Starting off with a little bit of news, the defensive players of the week. In the AFC, we had Jordan Poyer of the Bills in that comeback win against the Ravens with 6 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 3 passes defended. And then in the NFC, we had the Eagles' Hassan Reddick against the Jaguars with 4 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, and a tackle for loss. So really filling up the stat sheet if you're in an IDP league where those stats count. Moving on and looking at this week, some of the news and injuries. The international series moves into week 2. We have the Giants versus the Packers. The Packers are considered the home team in that one from London. That's at 9:30 Eastern. I know some people aren't fully in the international series grind of things, so make sure you set those lineups early or you set your alarm a little extra early on Sunday morning. That's going to happen a few more times this season, so make sure you keep an eye out on that. Before I get into injuries for this week, I'll touch on a few signings and some of the major injuries from last week. Joey Bosa is going to officially miss 8 to 10 weeks after having surgery on his groin. Jeremy Chin 2 days ago was placed on the IR, meaning he's going to miss at least 4 weeks. He expressed that he's hoping that it's not longer than that, but obviously that has huge implications on people. Even if you're in a shallow dynasty league, he was widely drafted as the number 1 DB with some dual eligibility, so that's a big loss for a lot of people and a loss for the NFL too. He's one of the fun young defenders to watch in the league for sure. 2 random signings that I thought were kind of interesting this week. Landon Collins signed with the Giants practice squad, which is super interesting. He's only 28 years old. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler. I'm assuming at some point you'll see him on the active roster. I mean, he's had many seasons where he's been IDP relevant, so I think that's something to monitor to see if he does get called up to the Giants active roster at some point. And then another name who definitely made some IDP waves in the past, Blake Martinez, signed with the Raiders practice squad as well. They've had some injuries in that linebacking. Or actually, they didn't sign. He actually got called up. He was on the practice squad, and he got called up to the active roster. So
he got called up today. Yep. He got called up today. Yep.
Yep, so they've had some injuries, which I'll talk about in a minute, in their linebacking core. So Blake Martinez is probably going to step in right away and see some snaps. So we'll see if he's able to be effective on that Raiders defense. Other injury news for the week, officially out, Lawrence Guy, Quincy Williams of the Jets, who's been up and down, had a nice season last year. Blake Cashman of the Texans, Javon Kinlaw.
Been very up and down this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric Armstead, Justin Houston. Doubtful, we have Jayon Brown of the Raiders. He's leaning towards more so being out, which is one of the reasons that Blake Martinez is being elevated to the active roster. A few guys that did get cleared. Xaven Collins is going to be playing this week. Denzel Perriman for the Raiders. J.J. Watt enters this week with no injury designation. Myles Garrett looks like he's on track to return, which is definitely big news for a lot of people that drafted him. Zordarius Smith, another big name on that Vikings front. And then Julian Love, who's quietly had a nice season at DB for the Giants as well, is on track to return this week. So yeah, anything this week really stick out to you? I know the Jeremy Chin news is pretty big, same with the Joey Bosa, but anything else stick out to you?
I was actually, it's funny, you were talking about Julian Love. And, you know, I was looking at our weekly twos last night, he was definitely like a top 3 candidate I was considering. Because, you know, you think anybody on the Giants defense besides like Leonard Williams or Dexter Lawrence, you're not really thinking about anybody else besides them. And even them for fantasy, it's their D linemen where, you know, they're going to get the least amount of points. So probably last in your head. So I was thinking about Love. Love has been playing very well. One thing you said about, you know, Poyer winning AFC Defensive Player of the Week, he had a huge pick on, you know, Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson's only thrown, I think it's either 3 or 4 picks on the season to like 13 or 14 total touchdowns. So he had a big one right at midfield. Hassan Reddick, it's very interesting. I was talking to people about this since basically the 2020 COVID season. So his first 3 seasons, this guy does nothing in the league. He has 7.5 total sacks. He has 18 total tackles for loss. He has 19 total quarterback hits. And then the next 2 seasons, and then including this season, and then he has 2 forced fumbles. And then including last season, and he had 2 seasons ago, he had 12 sacks. Then 11.5 sacks last year. Then he had 15 tackles for loss, 12 tackles for loss, 18 and 19 QB hits. So he was basically duplicating in a span of 1 season, essentially what he had done in the first 3 seasons. And then it's interesting to me that Carolina, they kind of signed him to like a 1-year prove-it deal last year, you know, for $6 million. Because, you know, he had that 1 season with Arizona. People wanted to see if it was real. And he played very well. And then Carolina just let him go to Philly. And Philly's front 7 is already very good. And you saw Reddick, he was wreaking havoc. So many forced fumbles. He had a couple forced fumbles, tackle for loss, 2 sacks. He's already got, again, 3.5 sacks on the season. So this is a guy in his last 36 games who has 27 sacks. So basically you can count on 3 sacks every 4 games on average for him. And, you know, we're going into, you know, that's over close to 40 games, you know, that he's been doing that. Quincy Williams, you know, another one that has been, again, very up and down. It's still going to be a hit for the Jets regardless, but it's still what, you know, you don't know what you're getting week to week with him. Zordarius Smith, he definitely needs to play for Minnesota because, and then the thing is, and this is, I'm going to talk about Bosa as well. Now you can shift all your attention to Daniel Hunter if Smith does end up not playing. You know, right now you got to make sure they're both covered on both edges. So you have to, regardless. And now with Khalil Mack, regardless, you know, he has 5 sacks in 4 games. He's been playing well. But, you know, DCs are now just going to scout on Khalil Mack because they don't have to worry about Bosa coming off the edges for at least half of the year, basically. And we're already 1/4 of the year through. So, you know, basically until week 12 at the earliest, week 14 at the latest, you're just having to cover Mack up front, really, in terms of, you know, pressuring the QB and stuff like that. I don't think really that Blake Martinez is going to miss a beat. Martinez has always been a great veteran who knows how to pick his spots, that kind of thing. Jayon Brown, you know, same type of player. Martinez is at 140 tackles, you know, in 4 different seasons. He was a very big part of that Packers defense that was very good, that made a couple NFC championship games. But yeah, that's all I got. Actually, Eric Armstead, though, being out, that does hurt. But one thing with him is I noticed that he excels really only when Nick Bosa is on the field, and he's kind of like very average when Nick Bosa doesn't play. So regardless, Bosa's still going to be out there, so wreaking havoc. And another little tidbit, I guess, is 49ers, only team in the whole NFL to hold teams under 10 points per game at 9.25 at the current moment, and are still 2-2.
Yeah, we'll see how that 49ers front looks this week with Kinlaw and Armstead out. Nick Bosa still in there, but it'll be a test for their depth, which I think is definitely an underrated part as we move throughout the NFL season. I thought your note about Joey Bosa is kind of interesting. A lot of people don't realize how that's going to change the offensive game plan for a lot of teams in terms of focusing or shifting their focus to Khalil Mack. It's not like when an offensive player goes down, we'll say a wide receiver goes down, you say, oh, this other guy is going to get a ton of volume and targets now. On the IDP side, it's more of a negative when one of their teammates like that goes down. It's not like his volume as a line or a front seven guy is going to go up. So I think that's a good note to make. All right, let's move on. Before we talk about the Thursday night game, which has a lot of action in terms of IDPs, I'm going to talk a little bit about No House Advantage, which is a great sponsor for Going for Two and our podcast as well. I actually signed up last week, which I'm disappointed Jerry isn't here because he kept giving me a hard time to sign up. So I did sign up. I put $50 in there, ended up coming out with 62, so $112 on my 50 in my first week. So yeah, not a bad week. I will give them props too. There was an issue. My bank sometimes has issues when I try to process it through apps. So I had an issue with my card, and their customer service rep reached out to me in less than an hour on a Sunday. So I'll give them props for that because I'm big into customer service. So I'll throw that in there as well. But
wow, on a Sunday as well, and that's good. That's how you start one of these businesses and are very successful with it. And it's very interesting, No House Advantage. This platform is being brought up in podcasts by PFF, NBC Sports, so it's gotten to the point that everyone knows about it now. So, and then getting great customer service back on a Sunday, as you said, you're not getting that anywhere else. So great way for them to start out, their company. Definitely.
Yeah, no, and
it's just going to help people,
Yeah, no, and if you haven't used the platform, it is super easy to use as well. Jerry and I did our betting podcast in the off season, so we get very in the weeds in terms of different bets and parlaying, but they kind of simplify betting. They do a lot of over-unders, which I think is a lot easier for people if you don't want to get too involved in doing these complicated bets. So I think that's a big advantage that they have. So check it out. They're changing the game, offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. They have pick'em style over-unders, like I mentioned. They have different contests that they run every week where you can win 150,000 or more. So it doesn't hurt to enter some of those either. It's like a good old lottery ticket. If you're listening to, those
are always fun. Those are always fun because they're free entries.
Yeah, I mean, legitimately, you have nothing to lose, so why not? You can use the promo code.
That's what I'm saying, literally just type in your name and make an entry.
Yep. Promo code, which I was able to use successfully as well, it's GF2. You get a deposit match up to 25, which is how I got to my 50. I put in a 25. They matched it with another 25. Boom. So it's even more free money for you if you're interested in getting involved. So GF2 is the code. Get involved. I can say I highly recommend it now after using it last week. I was very impressed. So check it out. That's No House Advantage, code GF2. All right. One thing I'm going to get into before we talk about Thursday night football too. I just want to touch on this quickly, but we every week the Going for Two team releases a waiver article. We did include a few IDP waivers in there this week, so I just wanted to touch on that. We had Malcolm Rodriguez, Frankie Louvu, and Rashawn Gary in this week's article. You can check that out on goingfor2.com. I'll touch on it quickly, but Frankie Louvu, depending on your scoring, has been a consistent top 10 linebacker this year. I think Hassan wrote about that one. If he's not owned in your league, he needs to be immediately. And there really isn't any reason he shouldn't be owned at this point. And I would throw that in there with Rashawn Gary as well. We've really seen his ascension this year for the Packers. He has a sack in every game, and I think we're seeing the evolution from him being a young guy with talent.
And he's just gotten better and better every year, too. Yeah. He just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Malcolm Rodriguez, who I mentioned as one of my twos, I believe it was 2 weeks ago now, he continues to get more and more playing time for the Lions. He had his first double-digit tackling week last week, so I expect this to be a guy that consistently leads that team in tackles week over week. So I'd snag him if you have a few extra bench spots and you can afford it. So that's all that I wanted to touch on waivers. You can see more in depth on goingfor2.com in our weekly waiver article. But all right, let's jump into Thursday night football. A lot to dive into here.
Man, Thursday night football between the Broncos and Colts. So when I tell you there's a game full of 7 scores, you might think it probably was a high-scoring game. 7 scores. They were all 7 field goals, however. The Indianapolis Colts ended up winning 12-9 to send the Broncos to 2-3, and the Colts have improved to a very interesting record of 2-2-1 so far, even though offensively they've been playing very bad. And their defense, which has been the same thing for Denver, has been holding them up all season. Denver hasn't even average given up 16 points a game this season, and it's 2-3. You know, they've given up 79 points on the season, and their offense just can't get it done. You know, and Indy's the same thing. Indy got blanked, you know, by the Jags. They only did lose by 7 to the Titans, but they're just another team that, because they're struggling so offensively, they need to rely on their defense. And let's talk about some of these defenders from last night. So Kenny Moore from the Colts, he had 12 points himself. He had 10 points himself, 5 solo tackles, and 1 pass defended. So yes, 12 points, Yannick Ngakoue, he had 1.5 sacks, 1 solo tackle, 1 assisted tackle for 12 points. And whenever I say 12 points, guys, we're going back to episode 1 where we had talked about how we are playing in our sleeper leagues with the scoring, with the defensive scoring. DeForest Buckner all over the field. It is very rare that you see a defensive tackle with 8 total tackles in one game. 4 of them solo, 4 assisted, then 1 forced fumble along with 2 sacks, 27 points. Zaire Franklin, and this is a guy who, when Darius Leonard did come back for the first half of last week, he wasn't on the field for the first half. But, Leonard got concussed, Shaq Leonard. He got concussed in the first half. Franklin stepped back on the field. And I was looking at data earlier. Franklin is linebacker 3 completely out of all the linebackers. And this is basically just Darius Leonard's fill-in, who still has played less than half of football than all the other linebackers up on that list. He's played 100% of the snaps still when Leonard is out. He had 5 solo, 4 assisted, 1 pass defended for 16 points himself. Bobby Okrikri, he's always getting you about 15 to 17 points. He did the same exact thing, 15, 6 solo tackles, 3 assisted. Stephon Gilmore, the former All-Pro vet, who a lot of people had said, has been declining. He had a very good game himself, 4 solo tackles, 1 assisted, 2 passes knocked down, 1 interception, 16 points for him. Isaiah Rodgers for the Colts, 5 solo tackles, 1 assisted. He had 11 points. Rodney Thomas, safety for the Colts, 2 solo tackles, 3 assisted, 2 passes batted down, and 1 interception for 17 points. And that's 8 Colts right there in double digits, and 5 of them scoring at least 15 points. Moving over to the Denver side, we had Kareem Jackson with 3 solo tackles, 4 assisted for 10 points. With Quincy Williams, cornerback, he had 3 solo tackles, 2 assisted, knocked down 1 pass for 10 points himself. Alex Singleton, who had been struggling for a couple of games, did come back and play well. 5 solo, 4 assisted tackles, 14 points. Damari Mathis, he had 6 solo tackles, 12 points. Then second-year safety Caden Stearns, and I myself am a big Texas Longhorns college football fan, so love to see this. 1 solo tackle, 2 assisted, 3 passes defended, and then 2 interceptions himself for 16 points. And he's been playing a lot in the place of Justin Simmons, and obviously no one is Justin Simmons, but I mean, he's doing his best, and he's a second-year player. So, he's and obviously second-year player in a new system as well, going from Vic Fangio's system to Nathaniel Hackett's system. And then Baron Browning, who basically has taken the place of Randy Gregory as he's gotten injured. They were deciding between Nick Bettino and Baron Browning, and they ended up going with Browning, who ended up playing 90% of the snaps, while Benito was just 10% of the snaps. He ended up with 2 solo, 5 assisted, 1.5 sacks himself for 16 points. DJ Jones, the defensive tackle down low, 4 solo, 1 assisted, 1 sack for 16 points. Josie Jewel, I will say, I'm very impressed with him. He broke out in 2020. He had 159 total tackles. He's got 31 in the first 3 games here. He had 8 last night. They were all assisted. But then he had a half a sack as well, so 11 points for him. He's the guy that he's got 190 tackles in his last 19 games. So you know what you're getting out of him, Dramont Jones, 1 sack or 1 solo tackle, half a sack. And I was gonna say that, but just 4 of them and half a sack, but 6 Matt Ryan sacks is 6 Matt Ryan sacks. So everyone was all over the field. And now let me mention Bradley Chub, obviously, because again, you saw DeForest Buckner do this on one side, and then you saw Bradley Chub do this on the other side, which again, very rare for a defensive tackle to get 7 tackles, 4 solo, 3 assisted, 2.5 sacks, for 26 points. And Chubb is a guy who had 0 sacks last year, who already has 5.5 on the season this year. And he'd been struggling with injury and just underperforming since about 2018, his rookie season. So it's good to see him playing this well, so definitely. So all in all, from that game, we had 4 turnovers. We had 4 fumbles. We had 10 sacks, 4 on Russell Wilson, 6 on Matt Ryan, excuse me. Matt Ryan himself, has been sacked 21 times in 5 games. He's on pace for 71. The NFL record is 73, set by David Carr, Derek Carr's older brother, when the Houston Texans expanded their first season. Matt Ryan also set a record that you don't want to set. He's the first player in over half a century to have the most fumbles in their first 5 games with 11 since 1970. No player has had that many in their first 5 games. And just to kind of put that in perspective with the sacks real quick before I end is, Andrew Luck just got sacked 18 times all year, and when he was with the Colts. Phillip Rivers only 19 times all year when he was with the Colts. And Matt Ryan, we're not even 30% through the season, and he's already above that. He's struggling, and it looks like he's fallen off the cliff, to be honest with you, because he can't even get to the point where he can throw it away now. He's just fumbleitis and throwing picks left and right. And So, that's all I got for Thursday night. Defensive slugfest. 17 guys in double figures and 10 of them with 14-plus points.
Yeah, absolutely wild. And if you're an IDP lover, that was your dream. I'll make a few quick notes. They kept saying on Amazon Prime, another big stat that you don't want to be associated with. It's the first time that two quarterbacks played against one another with 4+ Pro Bowls, and they weren't able to score or score a touchdown. So that's kind of an interesting note. But it's hard to see the Colts offensive line right now. So when you think of the Colts offensive line, you mentioned, historically over the last 5 years or so, they've been one of the top in the league, led by Quentin Nelson, a future Hall of Famer, one of the best, probably the best guard in the league, one of the best offensive linemen in all of football. They also mentioned last night that the Colts haven't had the same offensive line for any of their first 5 games. So, this is a team where it's interesting to think, if you're looking at streaming defensive linemen, this is a very favorable matchup, which is a weird mindset to get yourself into. But they've allowed the third most pressures so far, pressured percentage this year. So 2 injuries I did want to note as well. That Baron Browning left late in the 4th quarter with a wrist injury. It didn't appear to be anything severe, but he currently is day-to-day, so he might miss a little bit of time. And he looked explosive last night. Every once in a while.
He did. He looked very good.
So he was definitely impressive. And then Josie Jewel also left with a knee injury. They announced this morning it was a knee sprain. So it's potential injury, but he might only miss a week or 2, but that's something to monitor because he has been on the IDP radar. So that was also in the 4th quarter as well, I believe. So 2 later injuries for him that you'll want to monitor moving forward. Okay, let's move over to our weekly 2 segment.
I was going to say with Jewel, that's very good. That's very good. That's a new knee sprain. Very good. That's a knee sprain, and he'll be back.
Yeah, anytime you see somebody leave with a knee injury, you start getting super nervous. So it was announced this morning it was only a sprain, which is very positive news for him. You're only looking at 2 weeks tops that he'd miss, and a lot of guys return within a week or 2. So that's good news for people that have Josie Jewel on their roster. All right, let's head over to our weekly 2s. This is where we go over 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and then 2 DBs who we really like this week. So I'll kick it off with my first defensive lineman. It's Doris Armstrong of the Cowboys. He's been under the radar, but we just talked about Baron Browning replacing Randy Gregory after an injury, but this is who's replaced Randy Gregory along that offensive line for the Cowboys. He's been getting more and more snaps over the last few weeks. He actually was 3rd on the Cowboys last week in total snaps of anyone on their defense. So he's been on the field quite a bit. I think you're going to continue to see, and he had a pretty solid week last week, and that was with Micah Parsons being out as well. But the Rams are the Cowboys' opponent this week. The Rams' offensive line is kind of a disaster right now. They have the 4th worst pressure rate. Matthew Stafford has been under pressure the entire season. So I think this is going to be a team every week where you're going to potentially be able to stream a defensive lineman. So Doris Armstrong, I think, is a nice under the radar candidate this week to pick up a sack or 2.
Definitely. I do agree with that as well, because I was actually looking at Doris Armstrong myself when I was looking at the 2s. He's been playing very, very well. Yes. And, he is, if I am saying correctly, he's Randy Gregory's replacement, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Yeah. So and Gregory had an amazing year last year. So Armstrong is just, Dan Quinn, is he might not be great as a head coach, but he put together the Legion of Boom. He's put together a Dallas defense that's been top 5 the last 2 years. So when he's just doing the DC thing like Todd Bowles basically does,
yeah,
he's good at that role.
Yeah, the Cowboys defense was
Right,
historically bad a few years ago.
Yeah, it was very bad. They were giving up like every game. It was 30 points a game. I remember there was a game. It was the game that Dak Prescott actually got very, very hurt. The very serious injury in, and I was with a couple of my friends watching it, and I was like, it was the Giants game, and I was like, watch, the Cowboys defense is so bad that Daniel Jones is going to have his only good game of the year, and Jones had like 4 touchdowns passing and like 300 yards, and that's not Daniel Jones at all.
Nope.
So, all right. So for my first defensive lineman, I got outside linebacker and defensive end. He's dual designated, Rashad Weaver of the Tennessee Titans. He has been basically filling in for Harold Landry, who, went down 5 days before the season started. And Landry had 12 sacks last year and 79 tackles. And obviously that kind of production is going to be very hard to replace. When you're statistically only up there with Aaron Donald and Micah Parsons as the only 2 guys that have 12 plus sacks and 75 plus tackles. I said, it's going to be hard to replace that. But so Weaver's come in, he's a second-year draft pick. He's second-year pick, so second-year player who last year, obviously being behind Landry, he only did get about 10% of snaps. So this year he's bumped it up to about 72% of snaps. He has had a sack in he's had a sack in 3 out of 4 games, basically. And he's had half a sack to 2 in 3 out of 4 games. Total of 4 sacks in 3 games. He's taken away pressure from basically and he's also Bud Dupree has also missed a couple games for Tennessee. So Tennessee, how their front 4 works is a lot of people before last year, because they gave Bud Dupree big money, were scouts, defensive coordinators were paying a lot of attention to Dupree, and Landry was coming off of a down year. And then there's Danico Audrey, who's always solid, about 8-9 sacks. And then Jeffrey Simmons took the leap last year with 8.5 sacks as a defensive tackle. So now you still have Danico Autry, you still have Jeffrey Simmons. So, and then you have Rashad Weaver, who in the games that Dupree is missing, he's being able to take advantage now because of Jeffrey Simmons breaking out last year. People are, coordinators are paying him more attention this year. So it's allowing that to happen. And it's something you had mentioned with the Colts and their offensive line this year, that they're so decimated that Quentin Nelson is he's trying to overcompensate, basically, it looks like, on the field to make up for other guys. And this is a guy who set an NFL record for making the All-Pro team his first 3 years in the league. No one else in league history has done that, just him. And he got beat by Danico Autry last week one-on-one. He got beat by Joe Schobert, who's a journeyman linebacker, one-on-one. So Tennessee, they have been – it's very weird because on the season, they've been outscored 101-75, which is, minus 26. But they're 2-2, and in 3 of their 4 games, they're still plus 8. And they're literally 1 missed field goal at the buzzer away from in 3-1. And yeah, they did lose very badly to the Buffalo Bills, but the Bills are the Super Bowl favorites, so that's not losing the Super Bowl favorites.
Join the club.
No shame, I think. Exactly, no shame, I think. Both of our teams have been through it. All right, and then so. Weaver, he came in right away, and he had 2 sacks week 1, 2 TFLs, 2 QB hits, 1 assisted tackle. He's had he's had double-digit points in 3 of his 4 games. His lowest game is 9 points. Highest game is 27. He's definitely somebody that's sitting on waivers for people most likely. So snag him up and definitely throw him at least on your bench, because there's going to be very favorable matchups for them versus, again, a team like Indy, where they play them in 2 weeks, and they play Washington this week, which has a very weak O-line as well.
Yeah, and even looking beyond that, they play Houston, Kansas City, Denver, so Cincinnati a few weeks after that, which we'll see if that offensive line gets it together. So definitely some positive matchups on the horizon for Weaver. My next one is Delvin Tomlinson versus the Bears. I mean, I'll keep it pretty simple. Whenever I'm looking at a defensive line matchup, the Bears are in the conversation for me. Delvin Tomlinson's not a guy that's going to get you a ton of sacks, but I think he's got a potential for tackles for loss. And the Bears right now are top 5 in runs stuffed at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage, behind a very struggling offensive line. So, sometimes it's tough to project sacks, but I think this is a case where if Tomlinson walks out with 2 tackles for loss, he does have 1.5 sacks, so it's not that he doesn't get in the backfield, but he's a guy against a terrible Bears offensive line, the worst ranked thus far, I think, in deeper IDP formats. Even as a D tackle, he's worth a potential stream.
Definitely. I mean, and Dalvin Tomlinson, he's always played pretty well, and as you said, it's against Chicago, and you're always going to have opportunities against Chicago, whether it's going to be they're running the ball. They're going to run the ball a ton. We know they don't like to pass, so, they're going to run it probably 30 times, so that's going to be a lot of opportunities. And then there's still going to be dropbacks because Fields still runs. So there's still about, 25 dropbacks in general, even if they're only throwing like 17, 18 passes. All right. My next defensive linebacker is Preston Smith. And, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It seems like as if people have forgotten about Preston Smith with the emergence of Rashawn Gary, with a name such as big as Jair Alexander now, on that defense. And Gary getting better. And this happens all the time where a vet basically plays the same his whole career. It's kind of like Levante David and Devin White. Levante David had been just stuck on a team, still making 120 tackles every single year. It's just the team wasn't good. Soon as they got good and they got Devin White, they start talking about Devin White all the time, and they're like, "Oh my God, Levante David's been doing this for a decade,"
Yeah.
So Preston Smith, he's an 8-year vet. The Packers defense has been great, very great all year long, and including last year too, very good as well. Game 1, Smith had 9 points with, 2 QB hits, 2 solo tackles, 1 assisted. He had a huge game week 2, 2 sacks, 4 solo tackles, 3 assisted, 2 tackles for loss, 3 QB hits, 33 points. I mean, he was all over the field. And you can see that with the emergence of Rashawn Gary, people are starting to pay more attention to Rashawn Gary on the field as well. So that is just going to open up some more green for Preston to do his thing. So then week 3, was still a pretty good week, still double-digit points, 1 sack, 1 solo tackle, 2 assisted, 1 QB hit. And then he missed a game in between, but then he came right back in to play 84% of snaps, so he looks obviously like he's fully healthy if he's playing 84% of snaps right off of injury. And, he's averaging 18 a week, 53 about 18 a week, 53 points in, 3 games. I think it'll be closer, to the 12 to 14, 12 to 15 mark because, 33 points where you're doing every single thing along the field possible. It's just not going to happen every game. But, he's still a main cog in one of the league's better defenses and still gets on the field a ton snap count wise. And, there's so many players on injured reserve right now, out for a couple weeks. And this is both sides of the ball that people need to go hit waivers and pick up people, And, again, Preston Smith is a name that people should know because he's played for a while, But so, he's still out there, so definitely snag him.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. We're approaching the time of year where players are banged up. We're going to hit bye-week season. So this is where streaming guys effectively becomes really important for fantasy players. I think that's where I've tended to make a living personally. I don't know if I've always been the strongest drafter. I think I, reach for potential sometimes, and then you make up for it by, picking up guys throughout the year. And I think that's more important as a fantasy manager.
I do. I'm honestly the same way. Every time I look at the standings always at the end of the year, and it's like Hassan waiver wire moves like 250, everyone else like, 30, 40. And I'm just, you have to follow as you go. And there's going to be some times where, hey, it might be a player that he might score, 7 points every other week, but most likely he's scoring 21 that week. And it's just because, he's always been good against that cornerback. And, so it's good to break stuff like that down. As you said, I think that's more important as a fantasy manager is definitely week by week being able to get the best guys as well in there, All right.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, let's move over to the linebackers. Yeah. I'll start with my first one. My first one is Xaven Collins versus the Eagles. The Eagles, I think when people are looking at IDP matchups are typically looking at weak offensive lines. I don't typically do that as much with my linebackers. I'm looking for tackle potential. The Eagles actually allowed the number 1 linebacker last week, and they've allowed a top 10 linebacker in every single game this season. So it's actually a very favorable matchup. They lead the league right now in rushing attempts, which creates opportunities. And actually the fact that they have a good offensive line helps quite a bit because those defensive linemen are kind of out of the way. So then you're getting to the second level where the linebackers are, which opens up more opportunities for tackles. So the Eagles, as much as they have one of the elite offensive lines in the league, I think are going to be a great team to stream against. And for linebacker. So this week I have Xaven Collins. I thought about Isaiah Simmons, but he has not been good. So I'm sticking with Xaven Collins, who did fall outside of our top 25 this week. And he was kind of borderline, depending on where you look, kind of late 20s, early 30s, but still a guy that not necessarily everybody's saying is a must start, but I like the matchup this week.
Nice. Okay. My first linebackers, and we talked a little bit about him earlier. It's Blake Martinez, and honestly, it's because he got called up today. They're dealing with injuries. Jayon Brown is out, so he's gonna most likely have to play right away. He's joining other big names and veterans and Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, and he's been the mic before. And, when you've been the mic before in a defense, you're basically, a lot of people might not know what the mic is, but the mic is the middle linebacker who's always audibling out of plays, basically, whenever they see the QB audible out of plays, or whenever they see a shift, that let's switch to this coverage, let's do that, this, that, and the third. So someone who's been doing that basically his whole career, he's going to be able to pick up a playbook quick. That's going to be one of those things where he's going to help. And the Raiders have a very, The Raiders have a very favorable matchup, I would say, in terms of there's going to be lots of opportunities in terms of the run, the pass, and And yeah, I could easily see. It depends, obviously, on, how quickly they bring Martinez up to speed in terms of snaps. Martinez, I mean, he was still in training camp with the Giants, so obviously he's still in game shape. So it'll be on them to see, okay, is he ready to take 70% of snaps right away, or do we have to limit him to like 45% of snaps? So for Martinez, if he doesn't take off this week, he's definitely gonna take off at some point for Oakland, for Las Vegas, because the Raiders are a team that they're gonna be down, they're gonna give up points. So, and that's just another thing, is they're always giving up completions over the middle, so that kind of thing. So tackles will be a thing, and Martinez has always been great at those.
Yeah, it's still bizarre to me to see a guy who has 240 tackle seasons and 250 tackle seasons getting called up from a practice squad. That's just bizarre for me to read. But, I mean, it's rare that you're going to be able to pick up a guy like that from waivers. So I definitely think he's worth a speculative ad at least, because, if he plays well, there's no reason that he doesn't have the potential to stick around in that linebacking core. So, yeah, okay, I'll go to my second one here, which is Drew Tranquil, which I know somebody mentioned him on Twitter in our comments, and I actually do like him this week as well. He has 2 straight weeks of double-digit tackles, so starting to pick it up in that category. The Browns are 4th in the league in rush attempts, so once again, a lot of opportunity for him there. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting is that they lead the league in passes between 5 to 10 yards, which typically also offers a lot of opportunity for linebacker tackles. So I think it's a good mix. If you want to throw in there the potential for an interception, I don't personally try to predict interceptions, but I know anytime
very hard to.
Yeah, people, whenever they're streaming DBs, I always see them try to chase interceptions. I'd rather look at opportunity for tackles, which I'll talk about with DBs a little later. But Drew Tranquil, I think, has a nice matchup here with the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that with IDP, tackles are going to be the easiest way for players to get points. You can't rely on them to force turnovers, take back touchdowns, intercept the ball, recover fumbles. Tackles are going to be it, just your regular solo or assisted tackles. That's going to be your easiest way. So same thing. I'm always looking for tackling machines, Last year, even though Seattle was so bad as a team themselves, Jordan Brooks had 192 tackles and was linebacker 1, last year. So it's a very big difference, between just because one guy is not going to help you win on the field in life, but for fantasy, he's definitely going to help you. All right, so my second linebacker is going to be Quay Walker of the Packers. Walker has enjoyed himself, I would say, under the radar, above average season in the making. And again, I talked about it before. The Packers defense is very good. So, and even in games where, like week 2 versus the Bears on Monday Night Football, Justin Fields only threw the ball 11 times. He still managed to get a pass batted down, and that's, pretty good. And it's only 11 pass attempts. And, that's also his lowest output of the season at 10 points. And obviously every other team in the NFL is going to throw more than 11 times a game. Week 1, he had 7 solo tackles and 1 assisted for 15 points. We already mentioned 10 points in week 2. Week 3, another good game with 3 tackles, 2 assisted, forced fumble, 11 points. Last week versus the Patriots team that's always about 50, that is about like 55, 45, 60, 40 with the pass. Last week it was about 50-50. He had an output of 5 solo tackles, tackles, 2 assisted, tackle for loss for 15 points there. He scored 51 points in 4 weeks, which is about 13 a week. But, every game he's been scoring 10 to 15. So, as I said, because all these guys, so many guys are injured nowadays. And then these are names that we're giving you that are either players that are just getting onto teams or players people don't know about, So these are definitely guys you want to have to fill in. You're throwing 4 or 5 guys on IR. It's going to say, hey, your team's got 5 open slots. Quay Walker, go select them as one of them.
Yeah, Quay Walker was actually a guy that I was kind of scrolling through and considering, and then I saw you had him down. I was like, all right, never mind. But there's a lot of elements for me. I mean, going against the Giants with a improved offensive line, but still not the greatest. You have a team that runs the ball a ton. You have, if you want to chase interceptions, there's the potential there. So on a lot of different levels, he's a nice stream this week. So I like that one quite a bit. All right, let's move over to DBs.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't even mention they played the Giants, so that's easy pickings.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I got to mention they're playing the Giants because that's the juiciest part of it right there. Not to mention he's having a nice rookie season. So, alrighty, let's move over to the DBs then. We have, for me first, is Jordan Lewis of the Cowboys. I will mention he is questionable, but he got in a limited practice on Thursday and Friday, which usually means you're trending in the right direction. So I guess I'm picking on my Rams tonight, but Jordan Lewis typically plays in the nickel versus opposing offenses. Cooper Kupp, as much as he's not just a slot guy, he's probably going to end up on Jordan Lewis quite a bit, and I would imagine that the Rams will move him around the formation. So he is lined up against Jordan Lewis, which offers a lot of opportunities for tackles. The Rams can't establish the run right now, which, so they're throwing the ball at a high rate, targeting Cooper Kupp 15,000 times a game. And I think it offers a lot of potential for him.
All right. So my first defensive back is going to be Juwan Brisker of the Bears. Brisker is a rookie who's, he's delivered consistent performances for injury replacements. And I was going to say, Chicago is a team that's always on the field, way more defensively than offensively, because they cannot control time of possession whatsoever. And so that obviously gives more opportunities for Brisker to do stuff. And, he's going to be on, most likely, probably Adam Thielen is what it's going to be. They're not going to throw a rookie on Justin Jefferson. They might put him on Osborne. But it's still, again, one of those things. You've seen Osborne break, catch 7-8 balls in a few games here and there. So that's an opportunity for some tackles right there. That's an opportunity to, bat down some passes. KJ Osborne does have those random games where Cousins just gives him 10, 11 targets, just because he's open. And another thing is, we know Dalvin Cook he's either going to catch the ball or he's going to be able to break some runs to the second line of the defense. So, again, that's another opportunity for Brisker to make a tackle or, again, you never know. You can strip the ball as well, on a tackle. And, there's no NFL player that doesn't fumble. So, even Derrick Henry's fumbled before. And so everyone fumbles.
Yeah, no, I love Jaquan Brisker. His stats don't pop off the page as a rookie, but he's one of those guys where if you watch him play, he passes the eye test, and I think he's going to be, I think he has the potential to be a top 5 safety in this league for a long time, so he continues to improve, so I like the shout out to him quite a bit. My second DB here is Cameron Sutton of the Steelers going up against the Bills this week. Going a little outside the box here, but the Bills throw 65% of the time. Cameron Sutton has seen 99% of the snaps thus far this year, so he's been on the field a ton. He's forced 2 turnovers. He has a pass defended in every single game. And to me, the reality is when you're going against the Bills, they're going to chuck the ball. There's going to be a lot of completions going Cam Sutton's way, so I expect him to have a lot of opportunities for tackles. And so I like the matchup here. And we've been given a lot of love to safeties, and I think that's definitely important. Usually what you want to stream, but I think for me, I wanted to shout out a few corners and talk about a little bit of the logic there as well. You know, potentially looking at nickels that are going against teams that pass the ball quite a bit because, you know, historically that's going to offer a lot of tackle opportunities. So there's different ways and different angles you can take when you're looking to stream a DB.
Oh, yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, my second defensive back is going to be defensive back LaMarcus Joyner of the Jets. And I'm sure you're familiar with him. Mm-hmm. Joyner, 9-year vet, you know, who played against Robert Saleh for quite a few years and was definitely above average, and I would say had some good seasons. So, you know, he knows his tendencies, it's where it spots, and literally all it took him was 1 game to get acclimated. He's been on the field for 100% of snaps for all 4 games, but he didn't do anything week 1. He just had 1 solo tackle, 2 points, but then he's just blown up ever since. You know, he followed that up in week 2 with 6 solo tackles, 2 combined for 14 points. The production kept rolling week 3 with 2 solo tackles, 5 assisted, 2 QB hits for 13 points. And then he took advantage of Kenny Pickett. And this is what a veteran does. A veteran cornerback is going to do this. You know, he, basically Kenny Pickett gets thrown into the fire. LaMarcus Joyner bats down 4 of his passes, picks off 2 of them, 1 solo tackle, 1 assisted, 31 points. You know, brings him to 58 points over the last 3 weeks, which is slightly above 19 on average. You know, obviously he's not going to have 2 interception games with 4 passes batted down all the time because rookies aren't just getting thrown into random games every single week. But, you know, he's proven to be a guy who basically now has fully grasped Saleh's playbook and can get you about 13 to 17 points, I would say, on a consistent basis.
For sure. Okay, I think that's all that we have today then. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you follow the show's Twitter. It's cover00 spelled out ZERO GF2, cover0 GF2 on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. DR Fantasy Sports. Make sure you check out No House Advantage as well. We appreciate their partnership. Then Hassan, if you want to go over your Twitter, and we'll say goodbye.
Yes, sir. My Twitter is going to be KAAZEME. That's the handle. You can see me retweeting as well our positional lists. I'll sometimes be leaving comments on there as well. And, you know, we're here to give you all the fantasy football IDP advice that you need.
All right. Appreciate it, guys. See you next week.